I don't know what that is. That's all right. I should.
Give me 1, 2, 3, 4.
Get about 3. Get about 3.
Well, that's in there.
Thank you, Jane. She needs one too. Maybe have another one for me.
I said that's fine. Yes. I was having that kind of day today. Trying to do more you words backwards. And again, it's only Tuesday.
She knows you.
Whatever one you want to give me.
Want a local one or do you want like?
Well, I want to send you the notice. Yeah, it's on this back too. They did
Thank you. That's what I answered. Pretty much answered. I mean, you can reach me on all of them, it's just like, someone comes to look at it, go, it's on here, you know, that's my Google. Usually it's all spam.
Oh, I have one that whenever you go to sign up for a
Oh, yeah.
bonus card or something, give them that crappy email, you'll never see it again.
Love opening that, I would love opening that account. It's like, 'cause I don't have
You
my,
have,
yeah, I don't have my phone.
yeah, no, I don't either.
I know it's all junk and spam.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I have that second account for, just oh, yeah.
It's over.
Yeah. And I used to be OCD about, well, I'm just gonna delete them all.
Not working.
You know, you delete a page at a time, you're getting like 20 emails, you know, it would take me a long time to delete them all.
Thank you.
Well, if you're on any kind of mailing list, it's gonna be,
Oh.
it's like, delete here.
Good evening, everyone. We will call to order the agenda meeting of Morrisville Borough Council, April 9th, 2019. We will first rise for a moment of silence and our Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. If we can have a roll call, please.
Here.
Here. Here. Here.
Here. Here.
Here.
Here.
Okay, thank you. Okay, tonight we have, in our presentation, special presentations, we're going to go right down to the Borough Engineer. Food Alliance will be done at our regular meeting. This is an agenda meeting. And the auditing report will be done at our meeting next week, too. Also, they canceled doing it tonight. So tonight we have Gilmore here. We have Laura Das and Kevin Selger. He's Director of Landscape Architecture and Planning for Gilmore and Associates. And they have come here to show the concept plans and do a presentation for Patriots Park at Historic Summer Seat. So I'll give you guys the floor.
Hey, Laura, could you maybe take one of these and maybe lean it up against the front of the podium? And when the presentation's over, maybe we could pause for a few minutes, Madam President, and let the audience take a look if they wish.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's good.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Elora Das, and I work for Gilmore and Associates as one of the borough's engineers. Tonight, we would like to present to you the concept plan for the proposed Patriots Park at Historic Summer Seat. As you know, this project has been in the works for a few years now. It started with the acquisition of the M.R. Reuter Elementary School, which was followed by the demolition of the school completed last year, all with grant funding achieved through the Borough Council and the Borough Engineer. We've also just completed the first phase of ADA improvements to the surrounding curb ramps, and sidewalk along Hillcrest Ave with the use of CDBG funding. Now, with grant funding from DCED, we have started the planning and design process of the proposed Patriots Park at Historic Summer Seat. To give you an overview about this concept plan for Patriots Park at Historic Summer Seat, I would like to introduce to you my colleague, Mr. Kevin Selger, Director of Landscape Architecture and Planning.
Okay, good evening. I just wanted to start by just orienting everybody. On the screen is aerial photograph of the site prior to the demolition of the elementary school, with Hillcrest on the top, Harper and Legion on the two sides, and Clymer on the lower end. You can see the historic Summer Seat house on the left-hand side and the former school that was there. Laura, can you go to the next one?
Lights, because all we're getting on these photos is the glare. Can turn off the lights.
Can we?
Yeah, we can turn off all the lights, yeah. Actually, Kevin, could you pull that mic and hold it a little closer just so people can hear you better?
There you go.
Believe it or not, my doctor told me I'm shrinking. So. Yeah. News to me, right? All right, so what you can see on the screen now is a topographic survey that we have completed, and it's a little hard to see, but basically the school building is gone. But you can see there was a circular drive that was the bus drop-off for lower level of the school. You can see the box that is the Summer Seat house and the existing parking that's up on the corner of Hillcrest and Legion. The site slopes quite a bit. There is about 20 feet of grade change from Hillcrest down to Clymer. We're looking at that as not as much of a challenge as an opportunity, a unique opportunity for a park such as this. So can you go to the next slide, Laura? So we've been working on some conceptual master planning for the park, working with some of the council members. We've also met with some of the Summer Seat folks when we started this to talk about the park, talk about programming. The impression we're getting is that this is more of a passive park. You know, there really is not room for sports or things like that per se, particularly with the grade change, but also the scale of the park. It's only 5 acres, or just over 5 acres in size. So what we're doing is we are expanding the parking a little bit on the corner of Hillcrest and Legion. And we're creating a series of terraces that step down the hill with walking paths throughout. We're also trying to respect the summer seat mansion. You know, it has a historical character to it. And we're trying to orient this design to take advantage of the views and the interesting architecture of that building. So the pathways tie into that, the paving materials will tie into that. But again, this is a passive park. We do have a series of entrances in from the four corners. Well, really three corners. We are respecting, there are the two existing vehicular entrances off of Harper and Clymer. There are existing monuments there that we are respecting those drive entrances. We are reorienting the circular driveway partially from the existing, but picking up on those two existing drive entrances. So those are not changing. And again, that's a programming item that it allows for greater use of this park for other things, whether it be, I understand there may be a borough car show, you may have other activities that you may want to use that for. But for the most part, it's really walking paths, some plazas, there's plenty of seating, lots of trees and landscaping. We do have, because we're looking at this as an historic site and respecting the Summer Seat Mansion, we are including 3 locations for statues of various people that were important to the borough and its history, as well as a main central plaza off of the circular driveway. So.
Kevin, I know one of the recommendations of the committee was connectivity between the circle and the oval,
Yes.
and that was a plan revision. Can you speak to that plan revision and how we're accomplishing that?
Yeah, I don't have a laser pointer, nor would it work on these screens, but I can point it out. We did make a connection. Laura, can you hold the mic? And what I'll do is I'll do a little presto change. So we did make a connection.
Yeah, we need the lights on.
Yeah, could we have the lights back? Micah, could you hit or John, thanks.
Okay. We did make a connection in here that will connect this pathway to this pathway more directly so that people, if they wanted to, can almost walk a figure 8. And I'll turn that this way. These pathways were somewhat separated before. We've made more of a direct connection so that people can go around in various directions to increase pedestrian connectivity.
Now, is that a grade change, or is there a physical connection under the tree line here?
There is a grade change. That'll
Okay.
be a level of detail that we'll be getting into, but
Okay.
we know we can make that connection.
Okay.
Kevin, could you speak a little bit, what we talked about at the meeting, about the lighting situation, because of the fact that you're in a residential neighborhood, all the houses around this park, and with respect to respecting the fact that these homes are there, how the lighting situation will happen?
Okay, so our intent for lighting is, we have 2 things to balance. One is pedestrian safety within the park and being able to see within the park, also for walking services and accessibility, but also respecting the surrounding residences. So I think the intent right now is that the park will be lit for safety purposes, but at some point they'll be determined by the borough about a time that essentially half the lights would go off at night to decrease that light level, but still provide a level of visibility for safety purposes. Let's say it's 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock or something like that, and then all the lights go off at dawn.
Okay,
So that would be the intent.
right.
The lighting would also be a lower scale lighting, not a 25-foot high parking lot light, something that's probably more 12 to 14 feet in height. So it's a lower type of light.
Okay,
Okay?
okay. Lighting is also going along the driveway, so everyone knows, since that's going to be one of our focal points. The little square that's sitting on Summerseat's property is actually a concept that was mentioned from the very beginning. We don't know whether it's going to still be within that because it's Summerseat's property, but it was mentioned about putting a small herb garden, which was what happened in colonial times. And it would be strictly up to Summerseat because you have to maintain it. You have to decide who's going to be doing that. So that would be at their discretion, but we did include it on there, and it would be in a conversation with them whether that part would be in there. If not, Kevin was saying that we could do a connection between the walkway to come across the property so that you would be able to get across the back of Summerseat's property and into that park from there. So that may be a slight change in that, we're not sure.
Yeah, that'll be an ongoing discussion.
Right, yeah, on how that would transpire in there. The tree line, because of the fact that we took out a couple of the trees. One of the main ones we took out was near the sidewalk on Hillcrest. It was actually hollowed out in the middle. It was taking up the sidewalks. As we go into the next grant cycle to continue around the other three sides, the trees will be looked at. Any of the ones that would be probably in the way of the sidewalks where they're damaging it would then be looked into whether they have to be removed. The idea is, though, that a whole new tree line is being put into that park, so that's what you're going to see with that. So whatever's coming out, you're going to get back in two-time fold with new trees. So I don't know if the council, this is the first time everyone that is seeing it, along with the public. There was a small committee that worked with Laura and Kevin and the manager. So at this point, we just wanted the council to also get it. We contacted Summerseat, asked them to also be here, as well as I see we have some people from our MEAC also to take a look at it and get that first view of what this concept plan would be for that park.
Looks nice.
Yeah.
Any of the committee members?
Did you have anything from being on the committee that we missed? Or?
No, I think the concerns of the residents were addressed with the lighting and the worry about tree removal and how that would be kept to a minimum. We all agreed on that.
Yeah.
And that whatever, we would replace far more than what we
Exactly.
what would be removed. So.
Exactly.
And I guess that's it. Just basically reaching out to the Historic Society
Yeah.
and having them make a decision what they want to do either way.
Yep. And Ted was actually the one when we first sat down and looked at the way the walkways were done in there. It's very nice, but it's very unique. We were talking about how unique this ground actually is because of the way that it's graded. It's almost like a terraced effect. And with keeping the bottom portion of that, which is that used to be the playground area for MR Wright, it almost forms like a natural amphitheater. So by having the way that's going to be built into the hill, it's keeping the aesthetics of that for, if they're doing reenactments or anything like that, to coordinate with Summerseat, plus just a really nice open area for everyone to enjoy with the seating around it. But our thing was, okay, well, how do you connect the top to the bottom? Because we're already seeing people that are actually walking around those grounds already for exercise in the morning. So I think it was a good point to bring up that, can we connect that in some way so that you can continue that walk through there, almost like a figure eight effect. So I was glad that you put those little markings in there for us, and we'll figure out how to do that. Anyone else have anything they'd like to ask about it?
Yeah, Madam President, previously we had talked also about the possibility of security cameras being built into the lighting.
Yes.
Was that able to happen?
We did actually bring that up. We spoke with Kevin about it. He said yes, and it is something that, yes, I think that we should be looking into at the time we're building the park. All of that, no matter what park we're working on, needs to have security cameras put in them, whether it's Williamson Park or that park. There's no municipality does parks today that doesn't have cameras in there. It would definitely help the police department and our officers to know what's going on. You have to also understand, too, the tree line that's in there, it's hard to tell, but when we spoke to Kevin and Laura, the idea of putting in the whole new tree line was that it's lower maintenance. There's not going to be a ton of like shrubbery kind of thing that someone's going to be in an area that they can hide behind. You're going to have a sight view from no matter where you are coming around those four sides of that park. So when those trees are actually grown, you can see straight through. And that was the idea of having half of those lights stay on at a dimmer lighting so that it doesn't affect the neighbors, but they're definitely will be able to see, our police will be able to see on those cameras if somebody's in that park that shouldn't be. So yes, it was definitely brought up about security cameras.
So those cameras are going to be included with the lighting then?
Yes, something to do with those lightings or in conjunction with that, yeah. We'll figure out how to do
I
it.
think the question is it wireless, is it hardwired? Where does it get, those are details, that's like the
Right.
next.
Exactly.
Yes, cameras absolutely could be included.
Absolutely.
Right.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Would you like to take maybe a 5-minute break to let people?
Yes, I think that's a great idea. We'll stop for a few minutes, and
Ask
everyone
questions.
would like to get up and actually see that picture. We'll take a 5-minute break.
Madam President, can I ask a
Sure.
couple questions?
Oh, sure. I'm sorry.
Kevin, you mentioned that the parking lot was a little bigger than the existing one.
Yeah.
Is it still within the borough's footprints in their land?
Believe we're just touching that summer seat parcel. We're just like literally right up against it. Yeah. Again, that's a detail.
Okay, so we'd have to work on that going forward. Additionally, I'm just looking at the sidewalk from Clymer Avenue up towards the summer seat. Is that in the same spot as the existing sidewalk? Is that on borough property or is that on
So
summer seat?
that is the existing, that red line, that's their brick sidewalk that we're trying to maintain.
Okay.
Yeah, that brick walkway, I believe, is there now. It's just overgrown.
Trying
Yeah.
not to
Yeah.
touch it. Yeah.
Okay. And also, is there any type of vehicle access to either of these, the lower lawn or the terrace? Like if we were bringing in, like, say, a stage for a day or something like that, that they'd, I know with the difference in elevations, it would make it difficult.
It's going to be tough. It's something we can look at. It's going to be tough. There's definitely vehicle access in the middle. Again, we've got that 20 feet of grade change. That middle driveway, that circular driveway comes in about halfway, so about 10 feet above Clymer, if you will. But that corner of Clymer and Harper, there's almost 6 feet of grade change there within like 20. I mean, it's steep.
Yeah, I was thinking more so along the driveway when you come in off of Clymer. That's more level to actually, like if you came in off the driveway and hung a
Yeah.
right, that you could access it there.
So that might be something if there is serious interest in having vehicular access, particularly to that lower end.
And I'm not talking the driveway, but just clearance on the grass and through the trees that you could get something in there.
If you think you're going to be using it fairly often to bring in, I don't know, stage or one of these movie night things, that may warrant itself to be some stabilized turf in there so you're not rutting it, but would not be a roadway per se.
I mean, I don't know how the rest of the council feels about that, but I'd just like to throw that idea out for consideration as you move forward in the concept
Yeah,
to
I
the
think that's a great
finalization.
idea.
Yeah.
Especially if people want to start utilizing that area, if they want to do reenactments and somebody wants to bring in food or, somebody wants to do a wedding on the property. I mean, with this property, the way that it will look opens up a huge opportunity for, the borough to do more things inside that park.
I think we kind of touched on that a little bit when we had some questions about the entrance down on Clymer and Harper, whether or not we could make that, as opposed to having a step, we could kind of go into the hillside a little bit. I think we kind of touched on that.
Oh, on how to get up there, because, I think they were going to look at that end still, because
right.
it's steep, it's just how you would grade that in. That's why I think it was important that we kept the driveway,
Right.
so that it would make that accessibility in the middle of the park, not only for summer seat when they're having reenactments, but for the same thing we had said. If you were, one of the things that was tossed out there was having in your bottom portion vendors that would come in and do a market day. Couple weeks, the recreation board was talking about in that area. There's so many low passive things you could do to utilize the property. So, yeah, I think
The other
that-
thing I think we mentioned is the pathways are going to be stamped asphalt.
yes.
We
Yes.
could also look into the possibility of maybe widening the lower lawn walkway to make it a little bit more accessible off the
You
driveway.
could get off of there. Yeah, I'd see something you could toss in, yeah, to see how you could get into that area without doing damage. So it can be used for those lower volume things as well as be a beautiful park that's going to enhance summer seat. So yes.
And on the parking lot, I see what looks like 2 lights. Is there more than 2 lights in the parking lot?
That's a detail and it'll all be figured out. Yeah.
I know there's lights coming in from each of the corner entrances we talked about, be stationed throughout the park. Where else was it? And the statues are, let's see, one's coming in off of Hillcrest, I believe.
Yeah, one's off
coming in off of
Clymer and
Harper.
Clymer and
And
Harper.
then the other one's coming in off of Legion, I believe. So 3, one is a,
I know it's a small detail, but I'm assuming they would have lighting too.
Yeah, all of these little black hash marks, I believe, represent where lighting would conceivably go. But there will, of course, be a whole lighting plan that would have to be developed as part of this when the time comes.
I think one of the things that, that Allura and Kevin are working on, and actually Mr. Parker just brought up, was coming in off of Clymer and there on that corner and Harper, it used to actually have steps going up from there. Part of them are partially covered. We would like to make some kind of an access to get back. We haven't just figured out how that's going to end up being because that is a steep area. So they're still working on that, on how that would end up. But that's why you're seeing that on the plans, and that's still a work in progress on to do that. All in all, I think it's beautiful. I think it was a nice job. I think it hits the marks we were asking you for. I did a nice job with that.
Looks beautiful.
Thank you.
Looks very good, thanks.
Nice work.
Do you want to take that 5
Take
minutes?
a little break and let
Yes.
people,
If everyone's done on the council asking
John,
questions.
could we have
we'll
the
take a break.
rest of the lights back on?
Okay, we'll take a 5-minute break.
I think the original.
Actually, I'm going to give my copy.
I don't know how much you know, but it was more of an amphitheater. Yeah. And we kind of thought it would have a place when we looked at it. Is that the list for public comment? Too much. Is that the list for public comment? And kind of went with a lighter version of it. Right. Well, you know what I mean? It's like as far as like, well, because there's like, we talked about this, but he's kind of insistent that it's too much of a cutting into the hillside. But this is supposed to be like an aspect of stamp that kind of more colonial. So one of the things we had brought up was maybe
You can't enforce the regulation.
a little bit, so that if you had access, right, you could kind of come off the driveway and go around.
It's coming down the pike. I mean, there's. Yep. This whole area law is very much developing. It's a new business model. So, I mean, everybody's struggling to regulate it.
So you may have to speak on that.
Yeah.
That's probably why he's here about that.
Yeah, well, the fundamental problem is it's always been part of the big bag of property rights. That if you own property, you sort of get to do what you want with your property as long as you're not harming anybody else or their property. The things are, I mean, is it technically a violation to have something that, I mean, if you're in a district.
I also think that it's a part of public safety. There's been tons of house fires where there hasn't been working smoke detector. So, carbon monoxide. There was a family killed right at something like a B&B. They died from carbon monoxide
I'll
poisoning.
tell you what. I mean, there was an initial attempt. I mean, Lower Makefield went through this whole thing, and their original attempt to got challenged and failed. So we developed their current statute, their current ordinance. And what we have here was sort of like based on that, but developing it a little bit further, because every time that you go back and look at one of these things, you see a new tweak, Yeah. So it's developing, I mean, Justin was asking, can you force these people to buy insurance? It's like, probably not, I mean, just like you can force you mean an individual mandate?
What's happening, what we found out was there's.
I think if we force them to and get it inspected and everything else.
Well, that's the thing. It's got to be licensed, inspected. And a lot of one of the problems that a lot of people that decide to do this run into is, say something happens to the property, somebody's rowdy, there's damage, God forbid there's a fire. Right. If you just have your normal homeowners,
No, you're screwed.
it's not going to cover that. So I mean, then you've got this unrendered
I thought you were going to say that the Phillies game, Virginia has it on their phone now.
Watch them dig nothing else.
Okay. They're not gonna find the Masonic treasure?
They will not find the Masonic treasures.
Well,
It's hysterical, right? It's like
well, with this, I mean, one of the things you notice,
Okay.
if it's the amount
We'll
of
talk to
time
the
per
president.
month,
All right, Chris.
it can actually be rented out, which takes some of the financial incentive out.
But with this guy, we have a problem.
Yeah, he moves them from one to the other, so he's going to be able to skirt that.
Was that the one on the canal?
Yeah, he can shuffle them across township lines.
So he's not in violation of lower maintenance. Every 30 days, he moves them across the street. And so we're balancing it.
Right.
You're screwed. You can't do a thing about that.
Crazy.
Yep.
Oh, boy.
Always one step ahead.
I want to get around it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a pretty sweet setup he's got for himself.
Right,
It's
yeah.
genius, actually.
I don't know. It's going to evolve. It's not like it's carved in stone. It's a conceptual plan. Who's Ridge? Oh, Ridge. The party house. Just so you know, adopting that ordinance is not a cure-all for the party house situation.
President, can we reconvene, please?
Oh, you're being summoned.
Hang on.
Thanks, everyone. You can look at that a little bit more after the meeting if you'd like. We're going to
We'll
reconvene.
leave it out at the end if they.
Yeah, we'll leave it out on the table for everyone to see because we are going to post that. Thank you, everyone. Kevin and Laura, I want to thank you both very much for coming out and doing the presentation and bringing this first concept drafting out for everyone to see. Appreciate the work. And I'm sure we'll be in touch with you. I will say at the same time, since we're working on parks, and before I start with the public comment, when we got done speaking at our meeting with Ted and Eileen that's on the committee for this, for Patriots Park, Laura had said we now have to work on something, get something started with the master plan for Williamson. So she said, if you guys want to be on that one, it's up to you. I know Ted is tough with your schedule, but we can work with that. If you want to continue with it, they're fine with it, staying with the same.
I think we
So-
worked well together.
Okay, so how about if we'll just meet and we can have the first conversations about it on what we're going to do with that, okay? So whenever you guys can work out schedule for that with Scott, and the three of us will come in and basically do the same thing and get something on paper to start working with that we can bring before the whole council, okay? Thank you very much. Thank you, Ted and Eileen, for your help with that.
While we're on the subject of parks, do you want to discuss the tot lot? Do you want to?
Yeah.
Oh, at the end?
Do
Okay.
you want to do it during borough officials? Our tot lot we're going to talk about tonight.
Only because Allura is here. Do you know, is Thursday still the final inspection of the tot lot, weather permitting?
I'm saying yes.
John's gone, yeah? It is? Okay.
It is Thursdays?
For like our inspection?
Yeah,
Yeah, as long as, yeah, they make it.
okay.
So,
We would be safe to have a little ribbon cutting or something, I don't know what.
Does the public can now go
Anytime
in it?
after that? Okay.
all right. Yeah, because we didn't want like anybody in there unless they were allowed to officially be in there and everything's dry and ready to go and, okay. Okay. Yeah, it looks good. Thank you. Okay. And I think Danielle's going to mention that during the borough officials about it, right? Okay, we're going to go on to public comment at this time.
Actually, before we
well, I'm
do,
sorry.
just on 4A, I know there's nothing to discuss really, but we gave you a draft of a resolution
Right.
for 4A.
Right.
We've reviewed it several times, but we can't really vouch for the information, so.
I can.
Some of you
I
can
had it
just.
reviewed by one of their.
Good.
One of their board members. And
Is
it's
it
good.
okay? Do we need any edits? Okay.
They were very happy with it.
Because before we put it on the good paper, we want to,
I made sure that it was all
make sure
accurate.
it's ready to
Yeah,
lock
'cause
and load.
I think last
so-
time we had a problem with the date or something. We had to come
Yes.
back with the date. Okay.
All
everything-
good, though.
Okay, all right.
Okay, we're ready to go?
And on 4C, Madam President, if I could, the auditor took ill and could not be here tonight
Okay.
with what's going around that the rest of us have had. So they will be here Monday for that presentation.
Okay.
If council does not want to act on
The last one, I think.
9H
Yes.
Monday, because you're just getting it Monday, we can always postpone 9H to your May meeting if you so choose, so.
Okay. Well, are we getting their presentation that night? Is anything coming in our packet before the meeting that we have
They're
an idea?
bringing everything with them, they're going to
okay.
hand it out, they're going to present, they're going to answer any questions, all that night,
Okay, so nothing ahead of time?
no.
Okay. Well, the council can decide if they want to vote on it that night or to move it to the following month.
Yep.
Okay, all right, then we're officially ready for the public comment. If we'll open the public comment, please limit your comments to 3 minutes. I'll give you a signal to let you know you're at that. Sometimes it's hard to realize you're there. First person is Kathy Panzita. Please state your, still here? Your name and address for the record, please.
Kathy Panzita, 401 Hillcrest.
Just tilt the mic down a little so we can
Oh,
As long as I don't have to
or hold
sing,
it,
period.
whichever you want.
break it, you buy it. That's,
I probably paid for all the stuff in this room electronically. I had a question. I had first started out last year doing a right to know on the curbs and the sidewalks and the engineer's report. And it came back there was on that right to know, no such documents exist. I didn't understand why a person stood at this microphone, said we were done doing a borough-wide inspection, and in 2 to 3 weeks, they were going to be sending out letters. Now, all of a sudden, certain people start getting letters. And the reason I looked at it at that time was I couldn't understand why we were sending out UNOs on inspections and people had bad sidewalks. And so I want to know, was I going to get a letter? Because it's the time where you start planning outside and you have to remove trees, if you have to do stuff. Usually spring, you start planning for it. So I don't know if it's true or it's not true, because I did see on Facebook that someone said 88 letters went out. I was going to do a right to know, and I graciously said to the ladies, if you're going to tell me no such document exists, because I want to see the letters of the people that got it. So what is this program? Have all the letters gone out? Is it in a series you know, you sent so many and these people got it and you can't do it? Or like, you know, are we going to get one in September? Is it a rolling program? Could you sort of explain how they're going to do it? I did not file the right to know for those letters because they said, we're going to tell you right now, Kathy, no such documents exist in the borough. Thank you.
Thank you.
Want me to
You want to
speak to that?
Yeah, since we were just talking about it.
I don't know when you did your request, but if you got the response that no such documents existed, then no such documents existed. But if that was last year, I'm sure that was the case. There are 88 letters that are in the process of going out. Not all of them are out. I think the remainder of them will be out by the end of next week, not this week. Keep in mind that's 88 letters out of 3,106 parcels, so it's not overly aggressive.
They didn't get a letter? There are sidewalks?
No, not necessarily. Again, the pool of the database for these letters was from two sources. One was from a canvas that was done, and the other source is from complaints. So that's the two sources of information that are generating the letters. Ideally, this is something that I would have preferred to have seen started and done probably 2 years ago, ahead of a road repaving program, but it is what it is. So we're getting to it now while we're in the midst of a road repaving program, trying to stay one step ahead, mainly for curbs and driveway aprons. But while you're doing curbs and driveway aprons, you may as well do sidewalks at the same time. So not all of them have gone out, but yes, there are 88. And sidewalk condition, driveway apron condition, curb condition, yes, those are still factors that are part of obtaining a UNO permit. So that doesn't change anything with respect to the UNO permit criteria.
Scott,
Yes.
so then the curbs, aprons, and sidewalks are the residents' responsibility?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
And I think, Scott, before the meeting, we had talked, and he had said that if anyone got a letter and they want to talk to the code official to come out and discuss it with them, they don't feel that it is something needs replaced, they can always call and have them come out and go over whatever the situation is with them and see what they have to say about it.
Yeah, anybody who obtained the letter, if there's a question about what the code official's pointing out to them, they can just call and speak to the code department or the building inspector, and he will come out to the property and show them what exactly the letter is referring to. And, you know, certainly a mistake could have been made that he can correct.
Okay.
How far in advance, I mean, I'm asking for myself as well, Center Street's going to be,
You get a letter?
I haven't gotten one yet.
Oh, okay.
But I think I may be getting one. So I was just wondering how far out in advance?
What, for corrective action?
Right.
I think it's 90 days.
Okay.
So yeah, it should be plenty of time for.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you.
Okay.
Another question on that, Scott. If somebody gets a letter that says, let's say their sidewalk has a crack down the middle of it and it says it needs replacement. If they talk to the code enforcer and they decide that there's an epoxy patch that they can put through the crack, they don't necessarily have to replace it, they just need to repair it into good standing?
Yeah, if it can be repaired and not constitute a code violation, repair is certainly fine as opposed to replacement. Again, they're usually looking at, you know, trip hazards. You know, you have every kid in this community walks to and from school. So it's a lot of pedestrian traffic, so yes. And along with every letter, in fact, I think this was included in council's packet, your delivery last week, are the specifications for curbs, driveway aprons, and sidewalks. So that packet of material was included with each letter to help answer any questions and provide as much upfront information as we could front load.
Okay, all right. Next on our public comment is Hussam Jalad. Please state your name and address for the record, please.
Hussam Jalad, 45 Ridge Ave,
35?
45.
I'm sorry.
You can actually take that mic out and hold it up if you prefer.
You're taller, yeah, you can pull it out of there if you want.
No, maybe this is okay. My comments are regarding to, the short-term rental or short-term lodging
Ordinance, yes.
ordinance. And basically, it's probably a little early for these comments, but I'm intentionally trying to get them in to you before it's too late
Sure.
as well. So maybe it's for something for you to think about while this is happening. I think such proposed ordinance is a good idea. However, it should be limited to districts where it's allowed, as where the land use allows it, basically. So, for example, District R1, this is something I've mentioned many times before. I try to understand a little more about as well. R1 district is designated as a single-family dwelling and does not allow similar uses as such as lodging, rooming houses, or bed and breakfast. This is according to the land use table that the town has.
Correct.
So my kind of worry basically is the fact that such ordinance, without specifying or having limits on which areas that's allowed, might be an excuse or give somebody a permission to do such use in areas such as R1. Just want you to basically, I'm asking you to make sure to include in the proposed ordinance a clarification of the extent of where these districts or which districts you can do such use.
Okay.
And this will prevent or actually would preserve the original intent of the land use and zoning districts. So and prevents a neighborhood turning into a motel or something.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
something to think about.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to actually,
me to-
yes, I would. Our attorney's actually going to speak about it.
First off, we're very aware of the concern with these types of properties in residential areas. I mean, there have been complaints. That was the motivating factor that sort of led to the idea to enact an ordinance within Morrisville. My firm has also done a similar ordinance previously in Lower Makefield. And what we're proposing here in Morrisville is sort of the culmination of our experience with Lower Makefield, because there was originally an intent to regulate these kinds of properties through zoning ordinance, which I think is really kind of what you're suggesting, keeping it in certain districts where certain uses are proposed. That's been problematic, believe it or not. A couple of attempts like that have been stricken down in court. Some of that is actually percolating its way through appellate courts in Pennsylvania as we speak. So it really has to be done by a specific targeted short-term lodging ordinance, because when you're talking about permitted uses, like you're using the analogy of bed and breakfasts, hotels, rooming houses. The legal issue that has arisen is these aren't that. These are typically, I mean, they sort of fall into a legal gray area. This is a developing area of law. We believe that what we have going on in Morrisville is sort of like the culmination of what we've seen succeed and be upheld. So again, like this is like sort of a state-of-the-art ordinance for a municipality, and it imposes a pretty comprehensive system of regulation. I mean, there's registration, licensing, inspections. There are limitations of time on how many days per month the property can be used for rental, so you don't have a continual party house in a residential neighborhood. You know, these are the ways that you're trying to sort of get at it. We believe that this is going to be an effective approach. Trying to get at these through zoning ordinances has proven problematic, especially when you don't have a sort of wholesale revision of the zoning ordinance to accommodate this specific type of property, which would be a much more involved effort. And probably.
I'm sorry, I see your point, I agree, but I think I strongly still think that though this are all great in the allowable areas, like I would say R1 does not allow anything except single dwelling, and you can look it up, single family dwelling. By having, you know, I think it's you're permitting something that's not permitted in your own zoning. So I think you're gonna have some legal problems with that too. So
Well, yeah, I mean, believe me, we're sort of keen to the issue, but you know, where this sort of comes into conflict is there's always been, and this sort of rises to a constitutional level, unfortunately. There's sort of always been a presumption that, you know, if you own a property, you know, there's subject to certain limitations, and some of those come through zoning statutes. But say somebody's bought a single-family property in a residential neighborhood. They turn around and decide to rent it out part-time for this type of use. It's still technically meeting the definition of a single-family home.
yes, but sorry.
And we've actually had instances where we thought in other municipalities where my firm serves as solicitor, where we thought that there was an Airbnb going on, and in fact it was, oh, I don't live there, I'm letting some family live there, and essentially, I mean, you know, what we thought was an out of control rental was really just, you know, the relatives from out of town staying there for an extended period. So you sort of get to do what you want with the property if it's your property, and that's why it has to be regulated in this manner versus.
I totally understand, but I think even if a person finds a way around it, the law should not be permitting something that is illegal. I think that's more dangerous, to be honest. And I think also for rentals, there are rules and laws. They have to be registered. You know, somebody renting long-term, and it protects the people that are actually renting.
Mm-hmm.
So I think this does not protect anybody, and I think it's basically you're going to end up presenting slumlords and transients. That's what it's going to come down to.
Well,
where do you draw the line? Where do you know? I think I seriously think you should stick to your zoning. You know.
Well, the problem.
That has been stricken down.
Yeah.
That approach has pretty much been
That's
losing
where the
approach.
problem-
It has not been enforced. If it wasn't enforced, then why would it be enforced now?
The Common Pleas Court didn't uphold it. That's what the problem is.
Yeah,
The Common Pleas Court didn't. There are people that challenged the zoning in other municipalities. That's where the problem is.
Right.
And that's why I sent you that message. 6 municipalities are actually waiting because it was not upheld what they wanted to do in the lower court. It's now waiting to go to the state Pennsylvania Supreme Court. And when we went to that training session, which the policy committee went, I went because we want to be schooled on how do we handle this new business that's popping up in all these municipalities. And there was zoning officers there, code enforcement people there, attorneys there, us were there. How do we do that? How do we protect what we're trying to do without getting our pants sued? And that's what's happened is they've all not been upheld. They've all gone for appeal, and it's now before the highest court. We want to see what is the language. How do we adjust it to protect what we put in place?
I totally understand, but I think we're breaking or we're bending the rules for one person or two, or I don't know how many people are doing this for on expense of the rest of us. And I think this is just going to hurt Morrisville even more than that. You know, it's a race to the bottom. That's what it looks like.
Right,
to
and
me.
without having any short term at all, and there are zoned areas in Morrisville, so then nobody gets zoned, and there are people asking for those areas too. We don't have anything in place that's going to regulate and
No,
make them, so that's one
I
of our
agree.
issues.
This is good.
Right.
But again, I think at least for the sake of the fact that bed and breakfast is a good example. It's
Right.
allowed in a lot of districts, but specifically R1,
Right.
which I happen to live in R1 district, and I bought the house 5 years ago, knowing that, going
Right.
into it as that, and I'd like it to stay that way.
I
By you
agree.
changing it, it's going to affect my property value, and then it's going to basically giving a cover to slumlords to ruin Morrisville. And I just think something to seriously consider.
Madam President, if I may, I actually have some comments on this, but I'd like to hold off until we discuss the actual
When it comes up
agenda
in
item.
the
Yes.
motion, okay, in the agenda item, okay.
Thank you,
All
appreciate your
right,
time.
thank you very much. That's the end of our public comment. I'll close it at this time. Okay, this is our work session, so some of these things we're just going to go right through. Everyone got in your packet the meeting minutes for March 12th and March 18th, so please look them over. If there's anything you see wrong, needs to be corrected, please notify the staff in time to make those changes. I appreciate that. Next, under your finance, you'll be getting your treasury report this week. You get your bill list. Please look that over. If there's something in question, please contact Micah or Scott and ask for that to be clarified for you. They'd be happy to do that. Then we'll have a mayor's report. He's not here tonight, and our junior council person also comes. We'll do the report. So we're just going to go right into the action items. Some of the things on here are, I'm just going to go over because it's just things we don't need to have too much discussion about. 9A, we're going to have to cancel the June 2019 agenda meeting due to a conflict with the annual PSAB conference that is going to go from June 9th to June 11th. So we won't have a quorum to have that meeting, so that'll be canceled. I will go on to 9B and 9C, and you guys can speak about this. I'm sure the vacant property might be able to speak a little bit about it. This is the next process for the blighted properties on 50 Union Street and 179 North Delmar Ave. I'll open that up for anyone that needs to say anything.
I'll make a couple comments on it. So this is coming from the Vacant Properties Committee. This is the third and fourth properties that we're looking to move forward for, but based on their blighted condition. And when I say blighted condition, these are properties that are not livable. It's not just they have tall grass; they are not livable properties at this point, and there was no plan to make them livable. Now I say that, and I actually have a question for Scott, because I'm getting some information that there was some movement on 50 Union Street. Are you aware of anything? Because my understanding is there was some work being done there in recent days.
No.
Okay, so we still don't have a physical plan with timeline or anything? Okay, all right, I just wanted to check that.
And the only thing too, if I could just interrupt for a second, because you had that committee, if you could explain, there's several times that there's a 30-day
Yes.
process that goes on. They already went through that 30-day process. And now it goes, this is the next phase of it, correct?
Yes, this process takes quite a bit of time. So the landowner or the property owner is provided feedback from code enforcement that says, here's what you need to do. One of the main factors is we need a plan and a timeline for items being done. It's not a matter of you have to have this done immediately. What you have to have is a plan to get it done. So they're given notification. When that notification expires, there is a second and in some cases third demand, depending on whether or not there's been no response from the owners or there has been some response from the owners. Once we get to that point, the planning commission and then council both gets to review the information. The code enforcement creates or provides documentation that then goes to the courthouse. And
And the RDA.
And then we're provided a court order to move forward with working with the RDA, which is the Redevelopment Authority, to get the property into the hands of a viable contractor or developer to make that property something that is no longer blighted and is, quite honestly, which is the goal here, a rateable property that is not a drain on the neighborhood. So in some cases, we have to take these steps. In other cases, and the best case scenario is as this process goes on, the land or homeowner fixes the problem, and we don't have to take those steps. Like I said, this is the third and fourth properties that we're looking to do. The first two were
It's in the works.
It's still in the works. They were sing out the actual removal of the debris. That's all I have for it, unless anybody has any questions on these.
Yeah, just said, like, we wanted to state that there are, the last time that we went through this process with the Park Avenue ones, it took a full 6 months to get it through all of the steps, processes. There's plenty of notifications back and forth. What we would like the property owners to do is take responsibility and fix those properties or do what they can for them. They, at any point in that period of time, can pull it out of that vacant property issue if they choose to. It's not something that just happens overnight. So they're notified and notified and notified so that we can go through these processes properly. So this, what we're going to be voting on Tuesday is just the next step. So hopefully the owners will do what they need to do.
And just to reiterate, these are not properties where people are currently taking up residence.
They've met the requirements of blighted, yes. Anyone else?
Is there any, do you have any dates on when these started becoming problems or being cited by codes? How long has this issue been going on?
I don't have specific dates, but both of these are multiple year issues.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Anyone else on these two motions? Okay. The next one everyone got in their packet, you might have some questions. It would be a motion to approve and execute the site development agreement between Morrisville Borough and Britain Industries. I believe this is the next phase, correct, Scott, that they were?
Yeah, if the solicitor can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe this has already been approved by a previous council.
Yeah, it was approved in 2015 originally.
Yeah, subject to the documents being prepared, and some time has gone by since then. So the documents are now ready. The developer is ready to proceed. Again, most of what they're doing, most of this property is actually in Falls Township, not in Morrisville Borough. So very little of it has to do with us. So really, we're just asking council to reaffirm prior decision now that everything's in place.
I'll just say that as I was reading through this, I see that our engineer Gilmore is very attuned to what they're doing. They have been down there because I do know that the Planning Commission had a little bit of problem on the last phase that they did because they have an issue with the buffer area that they didn't do the way they're supposed to, and they were supposed to correct that. So as I'm reading through this, it's very detailed on what they're expected to follow through with. And so I appreciate that being done so that if you're going to develop in Morrisville, you need to do it right. And you need to follow all the rules and regulations. There's no cutting corners on that, no matter who the developer is. So it looks like here it's being followed up with our solicitor and with our engineer. So anyone have any questions? I think, Justin, you had a couple, right? Did you get them answered when you?
Yeah, I had a
Scott?
couple of questions about the agreements. The solicitor answered. They're
Okay.
minor things.
Okay, yeah, I knew you had asked about it. Anyone else? Because it was pretty lengthy, it was a little bit of a book to read there, but yeah, I thought it was done very well. Okay, if there's no more questions on that, if you have any other questions, I think about it, over the weekend, give Scott a call. He can probably answer those for you or get to the engineer if there's something more you need to know about that. Okay. Okay. 9E would be a motion to approve the Marshall Recreation Board holding a Marshall Music Festival in Williamson Park on Saturday, 10/19/19. I think they booked the date. They're still working on details for all that, correct, though? I think they just gave you a date for it.
They did submit I believe, a packet to code to hold the date and describing what they're doing.
Okay.
I also received an email recently from the chair of that board
Okay.
wanting to know when this was going to be approved by council. So I did let her know that it's on your agenda for Monday night. And I, not to be a party pooper, but kind of questioned the date of having an outdoor music festival that late in October with temperatures and rain. But I guess if that's what they want to do, hopefully they'll have ponchos just in case.
We'll be having a meeting Thursday night, so I will bring that up.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too, they were also trying to incorporate in that, since it's one of the first things they'll be working on, is things for the kids as far as like the pumpkins and I think the fall time kind of
Halloween,
thing
yeah.
with the kids at the same time. I think were several things they were talking about.
And I spoke to the chairperson yesterday, actually, and really what they were looking to do is ensure that the date was okay and the concept of having a music festival was good. To your point, the details are still pending, but they didn't want to go too far without knowing that council was going to allow them the date.
A date, okay, all righty. Okay, the next one, you received in your packet the resolution to recognize the Interfaith Food Alliance, so we'll do that on Monday, and they'll be here, of course, for that presentation. The next one, of course, is what we were speaking about tonight, is the motion to approve the advertising for the short-term lodging facilities ordinance for the May 20th, 2019 meeting.
Okay.
So at this time, I'll ask anyone that wants to talk further about it. This is your time. You might want to.
Madam President, I'd like to make a comment, please. So with everything I'm learning about with this ordinance and everything we learned about in that training, the truth of the matter and the unfortunate truth is we can't legislate good neighbors. There is no way for us to put anything in place that's going to ensure that somebody isn't going to go around what council has put in and do their own thing. And what I mean by that is this. In an R1 district, it's already not approved to do these things. But the ability to prove that that's what's going on is very limited. It's extremely difficult when somebody's looking at you and saying, no, I'm not doing that. This is just friends and family hanging out, for us to prove differently. We in any municipality, you're going to have a hard time proving, if that's their story, what the difference is between the people that are there and their actual friends and family. There's really no way to discern the difference. A good neighbor wouldn't do that. A good neighbor would follow the rules and not put you in a position where they're doing things that are outside what the zoning allows. Unfortunately, nothing we can do from this dais can legislate good neighbors. And that's the unfortunate truth that I learned from the training.
Mike, regarding, not being able to prove it, what if the property in question is advertising online for a room for rent? That's documentation, is it not?
That may be solicitation, but that's circumstantial. I mean, that doesn't necessarily prove that it was being rented as of that particular date. And actually, that's one of the things that the proposed short-term ordinance is looking to do, is force some record keeping to force owners who are renting their properties to keep records of who's staying there, when they were staying there, so forth and so on. And that's got other secondary potential. However, this is an area, like I said, it's rapidly developing. Cities of all sizes are actually struggling to regulate these entities. Airbnb aggressively fights back at some of these. And as a matter of fact, there was a recent decision in New York City. I mean, it was a New York State court that struck down that record keeping requirement for who's renting it. So it's an uncertain future, and right now what we have in front of you is sort of the amalgamation of best practices, but there may be challenges. It's impossible to
when
tell.
I was listening to you also, I know some of these sites require or ask for user reviews. So once you have the user review, would it be possible to connect the dots with like credit card transactions, things like that, to prove that there's an audit trail?
Without initiating legal action and obtaining subpoenas.
Okay.
Yeah.
So cost.
Yeah, and.
Yeah, you can't get credit card information without a subpoena. And to do that in Pennsylvania, you need to initiate an action, get a court docket number, and
Would the online reviews themselves be evidence enough? If they had admitted staying there and, gave it a such and such rating?
well, I mean, that doesn't necessarily. All I can give you is the lawyerly maybe. I mean,
Okay.
it's that depends on a couple of variables. Does that connect that reviewer's use of the property to a specific date? How do you know it's an authentic review? I mean,
Right, because there's a lot of.
Right, you could have somebody, hey, buddy, could you
Trolls
write
out
me a
there,
review? Right, it could just be ask my friend to write a review of my property on Airbnb. So you really just don't know.
And
Quick question. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
So from a legal perspective, is even if I'm a neighbor and I want to initiate a civil action against this neighbor, is it as difficult to prove as the neighbor going after them civilly?
Well, I mean, tell you the truth, in a lot of ways, the private action between citizens might actually be a more effective thing if you have a property that rises to the level of a nuisance.
And if there's some damage, right? Yeah.
Well, obviously, I mean, any use, regardless of whether it's the owner of the property or somebody renting it, it's the Pottery Barn rule. If you break it, you bought it. I mean, you can't use your property in such a way to damage anybody else or their property.
Right.
So that remedy is always available. And that's not a matter of regulation. That's private actions between citizens. That's just civil justice.
Thank you.
So one option may be then, in terms of nuisance, you could request the calls for service for the police department at a particular address?
Absolutely. Nobody should be causing a disturbance at all, ever.
Right, so if you have a dozen calls for service at an address where,
Right.
Right.
Or
That builds a record, and obviously that's something you want to do.
okay. So that's something.
I'll ask the attorney this, since this is all new territory for us too. Like I said, it was an eye-opener for us when we went up to Reading for the training, and how many municipalities are actually dealing with this, and the challenges that they've been dealing with. I don't know when some of these cases are going to go before the court, the dates on them. We're all keeping an eye on, find out when that's going to be. I guess according to what the determination is from those, would we possibly be able to make a change or enforce it differently when we find out what their wording is, adjust what the wording is?
Well, as those appellate level decisions come down in Pennsylvania, we'll be monitoring those. I sort of get those automatically because I get notifications for certain things that have keywords in. So we'll be aware of that when it comes down the pike. And if there is an issue that, it would require a change in language or it would strike out a provision,
Maybe a little more help for us with this?
I mean, obviously it can be something that's refined. Generally, there's a principle with ordinances, statutes, anything of that nature called severability, that if part of an ordinance is invalid, the rest can remain. So you sort of have a backup there. That leaves you scrambling to maybe fill in that stricken provision with something else that might stand up.
Right.
But again, it's an evolving area of law.
Well, it's really-
caused by a very disruptive service.
Right.
And that's really what it did. It disrupted the hotel and hospitality industry.
Right, and it's frustrating to the residents, and not just our town, but other towns too, where, like you said, you're investing money in your home, and they're targeting these bigger homes in municipalities that they can use those things for. And eye-opener for me was realizing that how far out of other states they are, where they actually set up those networks in order to work with someone that owns a property in a municipality, and they work as a team where they advertise them, they collect a fee, they bounce that fee back to the person that owns it, and it's crazy. And I was surprised at how many these are popping up all over the place. And it's disrupting. It's frustrating and it's disrupting because they're tying the hands of the municipality, and you're trying to, if you put a law, I have to agree with the residents, you put a law in, and to me, the zoning is a law, and they're going, well, we just aren't going to follow that. And then we don't have any recourse at this point. It's like you're begging the courts to say, help us. this is being struck down all the time. We need the court to step up here and say, how do we adjust that? I mean, it's not fair to not protect the residents if it says this area is not zoned for that.
And then there's our police resources that are being tied up as well if it happens to be a party house. You know, but I would recommend that you go back 12 months and do a right-to-know request for calls for service. There won't be a lot of detail, but it'll give a date and time and the reason for the call, and start there.
I had a quick question for the borough manager and maybe the finance director. There was a version of this that was discussed at our November agenda meeting. I think the code enforcement company came and had, like I said, a version of this, and basically they said that it would be too expensive to enact. So I guess I'm asking if there were changes made to this or how we're going to deal with that. If the borough manager could just address that.
Sure. It went to the policy committee for review. The policy committee did make some edits to it, but by and large, it's the same body of work that you originally saw. I don't want to speak for council members or the policy committee, but I think the decision was to move ahead with it, and like other ordinances you adopt, it will be enforced to the best of our ability.
I mean,
Has the code enforcement company seen this?
Yes.
Yep. Yeah, and they strongly recommended we implement it. But from the Policy and Ordinance Committee is currently tasked with figuring out how to fund this, as well as with the rental inspection program and fire inspection program going into next year. We haven't done much on it yet because we were waiting for the training we attended last week. I believe Keystone's also working up prices for us for what it would cost them to run the program.
I do know at the training, one of the things they had said was it's best to have the, as they call it, tools in the box for your code enforcement, because if you don't have it, you have nothing to work with. And if there is an outright visible, even if you don't have a full program in place, if there's an outright visible something going on that is within that ordinance, you have a right to enforce using that. You don't have to have a full program in. You can implement that in stages, whatever you need to do. You can implement just parts of it. But if you have nothing in place, you have no regulations whatsoever. So then we have to work on how we implement the full thing. But at least you have something for them to work on that gives them the authority to enforce what they can when it's visible that someone's doing something out of place. That's how I see it.
I have a couple questions for a solicitor. Based on our training, I came out from what the attorney there was talking about with the assumption that if we were to take this ordinance, and as our resident Hussein has asked us to put in specific requirements, or that it's not allowed in certain zoned areas such as R1. I'm going to throw out other ones just for examples: R2, C1. Because this is not a zoning ordinance, it would not hold up in court and would be thrown out because the zoning ordinance supersedes this?
No, the zoning ordinance doesn't supersede this. What has been problematic is trying to regulate these properties through the zoning code, essentially zone them out of existence. That has been something that is frequently challenged, and municipalities have often come out on the short end of those court challenges. That's why we recommended this approach, which is specifically targeted. It is something to consider if you want to, at some point, look at amending your zoning ordinance to account for these. I mean, it would take, I would say, a more substantial revision, because you got to look at individual districts, permitted uses in individual districts. You've got to come up with a workable definition within the zoning code that would meet these properties. And that's sort of where the problems have all sort of come from. It's a very slippery slope coming up with a workable definition of this type of property for purposes of zoning. Take my word for it. That's where a lot of the legal challenges have come from.
They challenge it that it's against their constitutional rights as a property owner, and they have due process, yeah, and they're winning. I was surprised to see that not one of the cases that went to the lower court did not stand up, and it just is now going to the next level. So it shows you how much push there is to put these things in the municipality. So it's disheartening, and it's definitely a battle that we're just going to have to constantly keep working on and see how we can adjust this.
I just have one. I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Ted.
I had a brief discussion with the solicitor, sorry about talking over you before, Debbie. The R1 zones and the zones we're talking about, rental of the house is allowed, and correct me if I'm wrong, that's where this comes in, that's a gray area, that the short term is what, that a rental is allowed in that area, and this is a short term, and who's to say?
I mean, right, because essentially it still meets the definition of a single-family house.
Right.
And, I mean, the constitutional issues come into play when you're restricting what somebody can do with a property that they own. It doesn't fall into most existing definitions of hotels, rooming houses, bed and breakfasts. So it's again,
That's where the battle is.
it's not one, it's not the other. It's a taint
So,
legally.
may I ask a question?
Yeah.
This would be our best approach at this point, based on current case law.
Yes, and actually based upon recent experience with
exactly.
similar efforts in another one of our townships. So
I believe one lost based on the judge asking, did you serve breakfast? They said no. He said, it's not a bed and breakfast then. And he threw it
literally-
out.
They threw it out for that. Even though they were advertising it online, the judge threw it out because of that. They just verbally asked them at the court if they would serve breakfast in the morning. Their attorney said, we don't serve breakfast. He said, well, then technically it's a bed and breakfast, and he lost the case. That's how crazy this whole thing is.
I mean, people rent out parts of their property, not the whole. It's crazy.
It's definitely it seems to be this new business that is popping up everywhere. So all the municipalities are trying to get a rein on it. And how do we regulate this? How do we put a stop to the areas that it's not without ending up where you're going to have a battle in court that you're not going to win? So,
I still have two more
There were
questions for the
more
solicitor.
sorry.
questions
Oh,
down
go
this
ahead.
way.
Based on our definitions in the zoning code
Yeah.
on a rooming, lodging, boarding house, and a bed and breakfast, do these type of houses meet that definition that would hold up in a court of law?
No. I think that you would have to come up with a workable definition of a short-term rental because it is not. If you look at the definitions in the existing zoning code, it's not a bed and breakfast. It's not a rooming house.
It's pretty close. And the intent of the zoning would keep it out, but because it's not written down.
It's very
Defined
close,
like-
but there's at least in the eyes of judges across the country, there has been a meaningful distinction.
yeah.
That's what they said at the training, you have to watch your words.
Yeah.
When you're using boarding house, rooming house, bed and breakfast, you have to be very specific with your wording. And they said that that's generally the only way that municipalities will be able to uphold their ordinances if they're spelling the whole thing out.
And you have to find out.
And you have to find out and make sure
what
that,
that is, though, because that's why
Right.
you're waiting for it to go to the highest court, because the other ones, no matter what they've done with the wording, it's been thrown out.
And it may evolve more as cases are decided.
Oh, it's going to evolve more.
Yeah.
We're not anywhere close to an end point with this.
Yeah.
Did you have another
So,
question, Justin?
No.
For a solicitor, I also noticed there was a requirement for a 1-week minimum.
I believe it's 1 week maximum, if I'm not mistaken, out of the month. I'd have to go back and look at it, but
So maybe Mr. Bowers could clarify.
I believe it is a minimum.
minimum?
Minimum of 1 week?
1 week stay, where I can kind of understand where that would help, at a party house. I know of another,
That is, Dave, just to clarify, that's a minimum for an entire residential unit,
okay,
not for
Not for a
specific rooms of a home.
okay. So how did we arrive at 1 week, and is there any flexibility with that? Could that be tapered down to, say, 3 days and still achieve the intent to minimize the turnover?
I think you should ask your neighbors if they prefer having new
Well, I'm
transients
asking-
every 3 days or every
Right,
7 days.
Right. I
at a
mean,
minimum.
right. The problem can be one of sort of unintended consequences. And, the 1 week, I mean, look, that's largely arbitrary, but I mean, pick a time period, as to how frequently you want, transients sort of turning over within a given property. And the other issue is if you're going to impose record keeping requirements and you're allowing short stays, that could be 10 sets of records for a month. And, people could end up challenging that as unduly burdensome. I mean, like literally New York City, that requirement just got stricken down. Whether it would go that way here, it's anybody's guess. It's a different state's court. So
what criteria do we use to come up with the 1 week?
Yeah, but I think there should be some kind of, discussion or determination if you want to change time periods as to whether that's the actual direction that you want to go in or if that could sort of end up backfiring.
Right. Was there any criteria that was used to come up with 1 week?
It had survived a challenge.
All right, that's fair.
I believe that's what's in place in Lower Makefield.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a couple other municipalities that are kind of mirroring the same type of language to see if we can kind of pack together to see what holds up, what doesn't hold up, and then see what the upper court comes out with and see where we can make some adjustments to try and break.
The one house I'm referring to, they charge $150 a night versus the party house that was discussed is at $50 a night.
Mm-hmm.
So you can see right there, there's probably going to be some.
Do they rent out
Difference in
rooms or do they
quality.
rent out the whole house?
They're renting out the entire unit, the one for $150 a night.
So you could have 10 people and it's $35 or whatever the math is per person as opposed to $50 per person at the
Yeah,
other
there's
house.
ways they're going to get around it.
Because there's, no, I guess, because there's only five bedrooms, so I guess you would have occupancy requirements, right?
Still, that could be 10 people if it's 2 person per bedroom, which would be reasonable.
So I guess the best thing we can do with this is if you put the ordinance in and this person's got this advertised, then you start putting that he's got to follow these rules, right? So that's where the pressure comes in. And if he doesn't meet them, that's going to basically force him to make a challenge against us that we're stopping him, correct?
Well, it depends how motivated that person is because that challenge is going to demand resources on their part.
Right.
They could simply comply and live with the limitations. If you discover somebody's running one of these properties and they haven't obtained the license, then the statute authorizes certain actions to be taken.
Right.
So, the idea is to sort of bring in some kind of
Rein it in somehow.
enforcement scheme. What you have now is sort of like a collection of stuff that's been thrown against the wall and is, for the most part, stuck. These things sort of fly on a case-by-case basis. If you have somebody who is determined to challenge the ordinance, look, that may happen, and you may have to litigate the validity of a given provision, but...
And that's what I'm trying to find that balance.
Possible to determine ahead of time. What I would say is this is a real-time experiment. What you have before you is pretty comprehensive for what's out there, particularly for a borough this size, really. Get something in place, try and get an enforcement scheme, and if it needs to be tweaked or adapted, you always have that ability as a council.
Yeah, I'd like to just find that balance between preventing the problem properties versus supporting a legitimate, conscientious business person who's doing a good job running the property.
Right. Well, in the meantime, you have to try and do what you can for the quality of life for the other residents that are in those areas. That's where that problem is.
Sure.
And I understand that totally.
But is that business person running their business, is it zoned for that or the intent?
Well, it was not a R1. I don't know the one I'm speaking of over here on Union. I'm not sure what the zoning. Is that a residential, commercial?
I don't know offhand.
Off the top
There
of my
is no zoning for a short-term rental facility. There is none. It just doesn't exist. It's like, is it zoned for a space station? When the code was written, it just didn't exist.
I guess what I'm saying is it's
commercial.
It's closest to a bed and breakfast to be zoned for a bed and breakfast in that where it's located.
But again.
Yeah, there's no.
Right.
There's no zoning for that at all.
Closest to doesn't cut it, except in, I'm told, horseshoes, hand grenades, and close dancing.
Yeah, it sure isn't going to cut
I was thinking more of a commercial designation, commercial enterprise type of.
So we're basically at this point, we can't with the decisions that have come down, regulate it out of existence, it would be difficult at this point, since it's so up in the air.
Yeah, I think
So,
that you
are
would
we
draw,
basically-
I think you would
yeah.
draw a challenge from Airbnb directly.
Exactly.
If you tried to do
right,
that,
exactly.
yeah.
So we can't legislate it out of existence. So what we're trying to do is set down a set of rules that are a minimum, at least, to kind of weed out those people who don't want to follow the rules.
Right, so you have
make it
something to work with.
So cumbersome to them that they don't want to keep doing this.
Right,
I mean, it limits some financial incentives for these.
Yes, exactly.
And the idea is that by doing that, you can hopefully maintain the residential character of some of the neighborhoods. And, if you have the problem properties, then you have the ability to go.
I mean, I've used something similar to like Home Away and stuff like that when you go down to the shore, go down to Carolina or something like that. There are things like that, but I understand what we're trying to do here because you don't want a party house.
Right.
So, you make requirements, you want responsible people. I mean, if our town becomes a destination, we'll probably hopefully one day have more people coming in than there are hotel rooms in the immediate area. So if if somebody wants to set up a small way of making money like this, they have a set of rules they have to follow. And if they don't, then we're able to.
Right. Now, listen, what I would say, to anybody who's concerned, who's living in a residential area, has these types of properties, there's not, as we speak now, a perfect legislative solution to this kind of thing. But there is always a civil remedy for you, potentially, as an individual, should there be a really out of control situation. If you have somebody that maintains a property that's a nuisance, there's, smells, noise, vibration, fireworks, public disturbance to the degree that it is impairing your enjoyment of your own property, potentially diminishing its value, that is a nuisance. You have a private cause of action. That is something where you can take that property owner into court and sue them, and it doesn't have to be for direct damage to your property. They don't have to bust one of your windows. They don't have to drive a car across your lawn. What they have to be doing is interfering with your right of quiet enjoyment by virtue of their out of control nuisance activities.
That's where that report
More than one
would
way
come
to
in.
go after them. Yeah. Okay.
Well, having read through it, I think it's a good first step.
Yeah.
Thanks. Trying.
Okay, the last thing I'll say on this, that when we went to this training and they were talking about different municipalities, they brought up Gettysburg. Gettysburg is, of course, a tourist area, but most of it is open fields, anybody that's been out there. But there's still a pocket of a small borough, very small borough, in the middle of that. A lot of homes are very old, very quaint. Same thing started happening there, and I was amazed to find out the amount of revenue that these Airbnbs out of the state of Pennsylvania have. They literally were just overtaking this small area. And Gettysburg finally said, well, we're a tourism town to begin with. We better also put something in place to start regulating this because they're basically taking over a town. That Airbnb had that much money that they bought up one whole street, bought it up, made them all B&Bs. And so they regulated the heck out of them, which they can. They're a tourist town, but that's how they handled it in that particular place. But just go to show you what the municipalities are up against. It's not just this person here that's got a home. They're connecting with these huge networks of Airbnbs that got plenty of money. This one that they were dealing with from out of California, that are actually funding this business that's perpetrating in all the municipalities. So we were kind of shocked when we were finding out some of the information at that training we went to. It was an eye-opener, I'll tell you that. Okay, anyone else on this? Oh, go ahead.
One more thing, and I'm just going to throw this out there because I know the question may come up for our solicitor. What if we just had the attitude, hey, we should embrace this, we should allow it, and we should tax 10% on it like they do in hotel rooms so that the borough can make a fortune?
I don't know if you have that taxing authority, to tell you the truth. I'd have to look at it. Yeah.
We don't.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
There you go.
Loaded question.
There you go.
Force them out that way, huh?
Yeah.
We'll keep working on it. Okay, if there's no other questions, like I said, I'm sure things will pop over the weekend. Please send messages out to the office. The last one, of course, Scott spoke about is accept the annual audit for the presentation from the auditing firm. Because of the fact that they could not come tonight and give you ahead of time, and they will be coming next week, it'll be the council decision whether you want to accept it that night once it's reviewed, and we can deal with it on that night. Okay, that's.
I say we just take it off the agenda, since we're
Voting?
since we're just getting it that night.
Yeah, I'm going to want.
No immediate hurry to vote on it.
Would you rather
Is there-
move the vote off of there?
Yeah, let's delay it till the following month if we could.
Okay.
So we'll move
Everyone a chance to look it over.
9H
Okay.
will be moved to May.
Okay, then we'll remove that off of there.
One more thing, just to go back. Scott, can we post the short-term proposed ordinance on the website?
Sure.
Yes. It'll also be
Just
advertised.
make sure it says proposed.
Yeah, or
If it's not.
or something.
Before we move off
With the
action
notice.
items, can I ask that a motion be added to approve the borough-sponsored Morrisville Restaurant Week?
I don't know when it is.
Sorry, I forgot to email.
So we'll make 9H, I'm sorry, could you, what was the event?
Morrisville.
It's the Morrisville Restaurant Week. It's October 6th to October 12th.
I also have an item I'd like to add.
October 6th to October 12th?
Yes.
Okay.
And a quick plug, we do have a Facebook page, so please like and share it. Thank you.
Okay, so that's just going to replace and become 9H now. All right. Okay, Mr. Nay.
A couple of months ago, you may remember Mayor Rivella had suggested that the DCED do an independent study of our police department. I recently reached out to the DCED to ask them about that, and they will come to our borough and assess things like equipment, manpower, standard operating procedure, management, and give us a third-party independent factual assessment of how our police department is operating. For me, the no-brainer part of this is it's free. It does not cost the borough any money to have done. And also, it's a non-regulatory type of assessment. In other words, we're not bound to act one way or the other on the assessment. It's informational type of assessment. I think this would help council, not only this council, but future councils, help shape their decisions, having this this information on how our police department is doing, how it ranks, that type of thing.
Are they going to be coming to give a presentation to explain the scope and how they do this?
In the meantime, I can reach out to them and have that question answered for you at a regular meeting if we put it on the agenda. I did speak with Sean Sanderson, and he said he was more than willing to come down and do the assessment. In other words, I'm not sure what the format is of the presentation of the assessment. Is it written or is it in person?
So, but you're going to ask us to vote on something where we don't know what the presentation is, we don't know.
Well, no, right now I'm
how
asking you to put it on the agenda, and in the meantime, I can find your answer out for you.
I'm not comfortable without knowing about it first, honestly. If they would like to do a presentation, I'd be willing to listen, certainly, but I don't know that any of us can possibly be ready to vote on something like that if we're just finding out about it now. And
What
we
is your
haven't-
objection? You're objecting
and
to some
I'm sorry, I
independent
wasn't-
person
Mr.
coming and
Nay.
assessing
Mr.
the
Nay.
police department for free?
I wasn't done.
Yeah.
What I was trying to say was, I'm uncomfortable having to make a decision when there's been no presentation done. We don't even allow to have an auditing firm that we're paying do their work until we have a
Keyword they're
presentation.
paying.
Thank you.
This is a free assessment.
I tried.
Okay. The only thing I'll say about this is I find it hard to believe they're not going to come back and tell you need 10 more officers, and then are they going to fund it? Because they can tell you you need a whole lot of stuff, but we've got, we pay the highest amount now of our budget for our police.
Well,
as it
again, this is a non-regulatory assessment, so
Correct.
it's up to council and the mayor as to what they take from the assessment and what they reject.
Correct.
You're not bound in any way to,
Madam President, I'm a no on an unknown audit.
it's an assessment, not an audit. It's non-regulatory.
Mr. Nate, could you reach out to them first to see if they would be willing to do?
Why don't we,
Conducts it?
I could, DCED.
why don't we
State.
ask them for like written something in writing about what it is they're offering?
Sure.
And let's share that with council, maybe discuss it at a work session, or if they can send a representative to do a presentation to council at a work session about how it works.
Yeah, I mean, when I spoke with Sean, the thing that caught my attention is having an independent person who has no horse in the race come down, make an assessment, and to do it for free, I think is a no-brainer, really. We're not, like I said, we're not obligated or bound to the results of it, so there's nothing to.
I'm not opposed to it, but I do agree. I'd like something to maybe, something in writing with who, what they look at, what their criteria is, what other municipalities they've done this for, just something to have,
I'd like to see a report they wrote for another municipality.
Yeah, that'd be good.
I mean, you describe it as an assessment, but you've got 8 people sitting up here wondering, does this assessment one day? Is it a week? Is it a month? Do they do a comparison to other similar sized municipalities around us? It's just, I know you say it's a no-brainer to you, but it kind of opens questions in everybody else's mind about what exactly it is.
Well, I think the key for me when I spoke to him was that he said that it was non-regulatory, so we're not bound to it regardless.
I've actually had dealings with them before, so, yeah.
Have you ever had one of these audits done or these assessments?
No. But when I was at the state, I had dealings with them before, so.
I guess I could, for me, my view on it is I could see if we really thought that it was something that we needed. I just don't know that we need it. I really don't. I mean, we're at a level for our police department that we seem to be okay with. I mean, we're not that far off from what we've always had.
That's your assessment. I'd like to have a third party that has no horse in the race.
I get it, but we could have 20 officers, and that wouldn't please you, Dave. You've made that very clear, that you think that we should have 20 officers. We can't afford 20 officers. In your view, for the amount of people we have, you think we should have 20 officers.
Well, Madam President, I don't know what their assessment's going to be since it hasn't been done yet.
Well, exactly.
So that would be the benefit of having it done. We could have a third party give us a independent assessment.
Well,
I think that would be wise on our
if
part.
someone's offering to chase down the information, why don't we just?
For what it's worth, I mean, the only thing that I'm familiar with is along these lines with DCED is they're evaluating whether a sort of regional police force, I think, might be more appropriate.
Oh, they do those too. I've been involved in those as well, but that's not what he's referring to, though.
Right.
Is something else?
Yeah.
Yep.
Right now, you actually have a problem where some of your municipalities upstate that can't afford police departments are using your state police. It's stressing that budget. That budget, as you saw in the paper, is being really stressed because they're taking it out of the funding for the turnpike. And that's what's paying those state police. So there's now being legislation put in so that the municipalities have to start paying something in because they're utilizing that, where we have our own police force. So DCED does look into that as to how they can regionalize some of those ones because of the fact that it's so high a cost for your police, no matter what municipality you are.
Sure.
So that I can see where they're doing that.
I didn't want to speak for you. Is what you're suggesting just the internal assessment, or are you also suggesting that they look at it regionalization?
No, this is just an internal assessment. And to Madam President's point, one of the things that they would look at is our operating efficiency to make sure that we're operating as efficiently as we can be.
How? Who are they going to tie up to do that?
Well, that would be the chief.
Right. So it's not free. I just want to point that out.
Okay.
All right, well, I guess get whatever information, or if somebody wants to come down and talk to us, but to me, I just don't think it's necessary, but that's your view, so.
Well, I think it's always a great thing to have more information, to have factual information. It's free, and it's a disinterested third party. So there's a lot of good reasons to do it, and it gives us something to use to go forward in our decision-making process regarding the police department, not only for this council, but for future councils. Thank
Okay.
you.
Okay. Something I wanted to bring up after the action items was, as we were doing the cleanup on the canal, and I know, Scott, you've been dealing with this with a couple of the tenders as to the trash that's coming over the fences and into the canal. Down by the Maple spillway, we were down there and pulling stuff out of the guys were and bringing it up. I mean, the guys actually brought up a tire with a rim on it that somehow ended up down in there. So it's quite a feat. But the apartment complex right next door to that, they have a fence there. They have the trash receptacle that they come in and pick the thing up, and trash is all around the end of it. It's blowing over the top of it, comes down into an area that you basically got to get your hip boots on and get across there on that hill to get it. And something that one of the tenders had mentioned, and it's probably not a bad idea because you see them in other municipalities, maybe we do some of them here that I can see, is what do you call it, an encasement for them. You'll see where the commercial businesses will have to have them, or the apartment complex have those encasements around them with the fencing where it's so high, so that if it is going to blow out or they haven't picked that up, it's going to stay within that containment. You're not going to get as much as blowing out, because you can see that from the apartment complex. Robert Morris does not have it encased anywhere, so you'll see where it's blowing off. The problem in back of the strip area that's across the street, it's the same thing. It's just something I thought I would toss out there, if it's something that we can do as far as our ordinance, to have that put in as part of that, where that can be a requirement for the big commercial bins.
Well, that and several other options were kicked around at a meeting recently that the borough brokered between DCNR and a private property owner just down the street here.
You think that would help?
DCNR didn't advocate for that as a solution.
Really?
But I know a lot of attention has been brought to the example down the street here, but as you're mentioning, this is a broader problem with the canal, and not just the canal. Down Bridge Street, there's a stream with a bridge over it on Bridge Street by, I think it's Cox Avenue. That stream has the same problem the canal is having, although it gets less attention because there's no stream tenders volunteering to service that area. So we've kicked around a number of ideas in terms of the private property owner and DCNR and the canal tenders doing things a little bit differently, and we're going to see if that works, at least with the example right here. I think every situation is different, but certainly we could explore that somewhere and see if it works as a test. But I'm not sure it's going to get you the result you think it is.
I think it might cut down some of it. I mean, if we could look into it,
There still has to be someone who's going to go and actually pick up the debris and the trash that gets blocked by the barrier.
But at least I think it's, especially when it's really windy, it's going to at least contain some of it. Otherwise, you're getting the trash down Bridge Street, you're getting it into your waterway. I mean, the spillway is exactly what that is. That's a spillway. So you've got this pipe that isn't that big. So I mean, we've got tenders that are going to get down there and they clean that out as much as they can, but that's really a flooding issue. If you're going to get something down there, like if that tire had gotten down that far into there, you'd have a problem with what that debris is going to fill up inside that pipe. So
They recover a lot of tires, actually.
yeah, so it's, like I said, that was another eye-opener, being down there and seeing some of those areas and trying to get that cleaned up. So I thought I would bring that up since it was a discussion and see if there's some way that we can maybe contain that a little bit better. I know other municipalities, I don't know, I'd have to check if it's in their ordinances to do that, but you'll see like some of the restaurants, they have to have it contained. McDonald's does it, your shopping centers does it, CVS does it. and for that reason, so that it's not blowing down the hill in the wooded area that's tough to get that stuff out. I think anything that we can do that's going to help that situation, since it seems to be hitting our waterways.
Yep, it tends to be easier to require that sort of thing at the time of development or construction. Once someplace is already established, it's hard to make them implement that at their expense after the fact.
Okay,
But, yeah, we can look into it.
okay, all right, thanks.
There've been a lot of cleanups recently, and there are more scheduled
Yeah.
for different parts of the borough, and we should all be thankful for the many volunteers who volunteer their time to do that.
Yeah, I'm actually going to just mention that real quick. The MEAC's got 2 of them coming up, so I'm going to mention it. I believe it's up on our TV station, it's in our kiosk out here. But the Riverfront Cleanup is going to be April 28th from 10 to 12 on Delmar and Philadelphia Ave. Rain date is the following day. Greystone's Cleanup is May 4th from 10 to 12. That's off of Crown Street. Same thing, the rain date's the following day. I have to say, the MEAC has been doing the cleanup on Greystones, I think at least 15 years, maybe more. So I thank all the volunteers that get up there and make sure that it's our first open space saved property was actually Greystone when that program began. So it's an important piece of property. So anybody that has a chance to get up there and help out with either one of those, that would be a great help. Is there any other announcements?
I do, real quick. April 20th, 11 a.m., Williamson Park is the Morrisville Borough, Morrisville Yardley Rotary Club egg hunt. It's been great the last few years. We're expecting really good weather because we get it every year, so fingers crossed. And it's been a great turnout the last several years. If you haven't been to one, come on out. It's really a good time.
Just one thing real quickly, the Business Outreach Committee is hosting a tour of the former Wells Fargo Morrisville Bank Building on Bridge Street and Pennsylvania Avenue. That is this coming Monday, April 15th at 8:30 a.m. If anyone knows of a business or organization that may be looking for space, please feel free to invite them. It is over 10,000 square foot space, so we can get in there and maybe get some buzz going. Thank you.
What was the time again on that, please?
8:30 a.m.
8:30, okay. This coming Monday. Before she does, just let me mention something real quick I forgot about. We received a grant, Alora's here, we received a grant for the WalkWorks program. We met for just a short meeting this past week, and Alora and another one of their staff from Gilmore was here, along with Scott and myself. And we had started to go over what initiates that and what would actually be a part of pulling that all together. And what it basically is we're trying to get a strategy for improving pedestrian and bicycle routes and creating community-based walking programs. And the ultimate goal is not only to increase physical activity, but also the fact that between our levee walk and our canal and the fact that we are part of the Greenway Trails circuit, that all the municipalities are starting to connect themselves into where you can get from one town to another, whether it's biking, whether it's walking, and you want to do the more incentives for that to happen. And Morrisville has a lot of areas that can be utilized in connecting those. So that's basically what that grant that we went for, that we got approved for, and that we're working on the plans for that. So we're going to have a few more meetings, but basically what Alora and the other engineer had gone over was they were making contacts with what you call stakeholders or key persons that would be having that conversation with the next meetings on what would be involved. So you're talking, there's PennDOT, the Trails Programs Manager, Mid-Atlantic Greenway Coordinator. There's a whole slew of them, along with some of the people right here from in town that you would want to pull in as also stakeholders on that. Same thing, the school district also, Jason Harris is on there because of the fact that we have students that walk to the school. So they might want to have an input on a walkability study for here in
Well,
town.
I think we're going to contact and invite Jason Harris.
Yeah,
I'm not sure he
yeah.
knows about it
Yeah,
yet. so.
but just to let you know, some of the people.
It might be
from
him, or he might designate someone from the
Right.
school district to
So
participate.
the initial meeting was just to meet and start pulling in some of the people that we're working on this program all together. So just to let you know that we've started working on it. We haven't gotten it all pulled together yet, but that's what that Walks Work meeting was about this past week. Okay.
Madam, if I may, Madam President, I just wanted to thank everybody that came out for the canal cleanup. They did an outstanding job. There was Josh Gradwall, who is one of our canal tenders, came out the day before and cleaned up the hill by that 111 Bridge Street where we've had so many issues, and Scott has received so many emails regarding it is spotless. Also special mention to the Trofe family. They came down with, I believe, 3 canoes and were wading in about waist deep, removing brush and branches, and they did an outstanding job.
That's a very difficult spot because of the slope of that embankment. It's very
hill.
steep.
Yep.
And it's very difficult for them to get, and dangerous for them to get to. That's what one we had the meeting about, so, yeah.
Yeah, and to Madam President's point about, wind-blown trash, that's all along the canal. Also, to that same point, I think the wind sometimes blows trash into our street drainage systems, and then when it rains, it comes down those drainage systems and into the canal. I couldn't believe the day after the cleanup, I go out my back fence, and here's some plastic bottle floating. I'm like, whoa, where did this come from? And I realized that it was coming from the storm drain because we had rain the night before. So I've been in touch with DCNR and the Friends of the Delaware Canal in maybe putting up a floating containment boom around those storm drains. Like the one that's behind my house, I could certainly commit to cleaning weekly. But, we can do it in other areas, and that way, there is a slight flow to the canal, depending on whether it's being filled or drained, and that would maybe help prevent some of that trash from, floating down the canal and, by containing it into that one area. So, but anyway, thanks. It was a good, productive day.
Just give a quick shout out to Mr. Lader, our superintendent, and also to Ron McDaniels. He stopped out to check the bathrooms at the time we were meeting to do the canal, and we got to speak to him. And I know that John and him have gone out there making sure that it is locked down in the evening so that's not being used for anything it shouldn't be. So that was important, and I appreciate him coming out and handling those sort of things, having the conversation with us. And I know that he's been down there doing some work down there also. So I thank you guys for doing that. It's important. Also, one last thing on the canal, you'll notice there's a big tree that's been in the canal now for several years, and I know our municipality has contacted many times to ask if that thing's being taken down. And one of the tenders had said that they did receive notification from DCNR that they do with the funding this year, and they're going to be taking that tree down. So
Yeah, I just
one you see there by Maple.
Yeah, the one, there's one about 100, 200 yards north of the Red Bridge.
Yeah.
The state came through and picked up all the debris today. They said the way they work it is they work north to south, and right
Yeah.
now they're down around their maintenance building in Yardley.
Yeah.
So they're working their way down. The other thing I wanted to mention too, on the Red Bridge, Toll Brothers has committed to purchasing the wood for that project. So unfortunately, it's going to be fresh cut green wood, so it's going to need some time to dry before it's actually installed. But that's a good step in the right direction. Thanks. That's all I have.
Okay. All right.
You go now?
Yeah, sure.
You're so patient.
Aren't I though?
Sorry, Dee.
It's okay. Beautification Committee will be at Robert Morris Plaza on Saturday. We will be cleaning up, weeding, mulching, planting, getting that all ready for spring. So if anybody wants to come out and join us, we will begin at 11 a.m. We'll also be doing a little spot down in Williamson Park in front of the stage area for getting that ready for the Easter egg hunt, which is next week. And then I also wanted to bring up, since the tot lot is nearing completion, and we're just waiting for an inspection. I just wanted to get everybody's feedback on maybe doing a small ribbon cutting ceremony for this new playground area.
Yes, please.
I wanted to just get everybody's feedback, see, it's supposed to be inspected Thursday?
Weather permitting,
Well, yeah, weather
Thursday.
permitting.
So
I
maybe,
was thinking maybe if council members can join us, pull this off.
do you want to,
And, you know,
what time is the cleanup on Saturday? in the
cleanup
morning?
is at 11.
No, the one at the park area first. What
Well,
time's that?
we're meeting at 11 o'clock, and whoever comes, we can split off and do everything. But I mean, if we can meet down at the park at
9
10
a.m.
o'clock, I mean, it's not going to take that long to do, and then whoever wants to stay and
Officially open it at that
and
time?
officially open it for, you know, the kids
public.
in that age group.
Okay.
I'll order the ribbon
Love
from
it.
Amazon. They have a big, huge ribbon,
Okay, so,
you know, that we can put
Any-
across the openings.
Get the big gold
Scott, would you
scissors.
be able to
everybody's
reach
I
out?
think
on
they
it.
striped the new parking spaces, ADA parking spaces, just today.
It is.
Would you be able to reach out to any of our local representatives to see if they'd be interested and available?
Sure, Saturday, 10 a.m.?
I'd like to see how everybody else on
Is that
council
what-
feels.
Oh, well, we're polling.
yeah,
I mean,
I'm good.
okay.
Everybody else?
It's fine.
We're going to be down there
Unfortunately,
anyway.
I'd love to be there, but unfortunately, I work this
Yeah,
Saturday.
usually work on
so,
Saturdays, yeah.
are you working this Saturday?
Yeah.
What is it, the 13th?
Yes.
Saturday?
I think so.
Okay. Shouldn't take that long to
Yeah, it
officially
shouldn't take that long at all.
opening it and the
Just
people are waiting to get in.
officially opening it up for the
Saturdays
kids.
are tough.
Kids are waiting patiently for all the orange fencing and the tape and everything to be gone.
Okay.
Tot lot ribbon cutting, Saturday, 10 a.m.
All right.
I will spread the word.
All right.
But you mentioned the beautiful people had a committee report.
Beautification
Some
committee.
good news, although we'll see. Congressman Fitzpatrick was kind enough to give us a contact at Amtrak that Mr. Lader has been dealing with regarding
My
the
wall, or not my
retaining-
wall, that
retaining
wall.
wall at the
Yes.
embankment by the bridge, South Pennsylvania Avenue.
Mm-hmm.
And while they won't commit to anything, they're going to look at it
Oh, thank God.
and at least get the trash cleaned up and see if
you
we
know
can
what,
get
at
the
this
wall
point-
repointed.
I'll take that.
Repointed, it needs fixed. Repointed isn't
The
doing
wall is falling down. I've been trying to get this
it. Is.
situated
Make it
for-
Stand up,
Isn't that a song, Walls Come Tumbling Down or something?
yeah.
Isn't that Rolling Stones?
Searscape
I don't have the railroad
Stones?
tracks on
Is it the Rolling
Philadelphia
Stones?
Avenue.
I don't know.
So
But that's all I had.
we'll continue to press Amtrak for their assistance there.
Okay.
All right.
All right. If there's nothing else, then I'm going to ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All-
I have a
Oh,
few
I'm
thing.
sorry. I'm sorry. I
I've been
said it to
waiting
anybody. I'm
patiently.
sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to talk about Philadelphia Avenue as well. I wanted to thank John for calling them, reaching out to them, because I know he was talking to them also about the river that we have in front of Dacey's, and they're working with that as well. Yeah, Lake Dacey. But I'm glad to hear that they also said they're going to come and look at the wall that's falling over. Also, I spoke with you Friday about Ohio and Dieter. Did you get anywhere with that yet?
Not yet.
Okay, because they also have a large pile of truck tires that you can see because the fence is laying down. It's right there, which
Still coming in and out.
is a fire hazard as well as a breeding ground for mosquitoes and rats. So we need that taken care of as well.
We're taking a field trip tomorrow.
Good. Because it's a mess, and we need something done with that for the residents that live down there in Ohio and Dieter. One more thing.
That's Justin's line. That's Justin's
Columbo.
line.
I mentioned to you Friday that a woman had called me up about the alley on the south side of Bridge Street that runs behind Bridge Street and the homes and stuff. I didn't get to speak with her. I misplaced her number, but I did ride up there today before I came here. And between Morris and Lafayette, there are large potholes, gullies, that if the borough could go back there and drop some stone in, I'm sure that they would greatly appreciate that, because a lot of people park back there behind their homes.
I mean, Clymer?
No, Morris and Lafayette.
It's an alley.
Keystone and, between Keystone and Lafayette, it's not bad.
Oh,
but
okay.
Between Shelton and Harding is like a river today. I mean, it definitely needs stone in there as well. Behind the Penn Tavern. Yeah, it's like a river.
I will ask Public Works to look at that.
They could do that, I'd appreciate it. And I'm done.
That it?
Oh, one more thing. I'm just kidding.
Motion to close?
I'm almost afraid to say it now. Okay, now we adjourned?
So moved.
So moved.
Okay,
Aye.
all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? I didn't think so. All right, we're adjourned.